Ever heard the expression, a force of nature? You know, like something so huge and powerful, it's basically unstoppable. Well, today we're going to try to unpack that. Like,
Yeah.
what makes something truly unstoppable?
Yeah, like a juggernaut.
Yeah, exactly. Like a juggernaut, just unstoppable.
Uh-huh.
And we've got some pretty interesting insights to help us do that. We're diving into this source called The Nature of Unstoppable Forces.
Okay, cool.
So we're going to try to figure out, like, what are the core elements of what they call an undying force?
That's a cool way to put it, an undying force.
Yeah, so like not just powerful in the moment, but like what keeps that momentum going.
Right, because it's more than just like initial power or size, right? Like what
Yeah.
makes something keep going, what sustains it. This source emphasizes this undying force idea.
Exactly. And the source is saying that persistence, like, it's not just this one and done thing.
Right.
It takes continuous effort. Like, you've got to have these constant pushes to keep it going.
These pushes, yeah. And I think where it gets really interesting is like, where are those pushes coming from?
Oh, that's a good point.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what's the source of that drive?
Yeah, because the source talks about this difference between being driven by things outside of you versus like a fire that comes from within.
Yeah, totally. They give this great example with money.
Oh, yeah.
Like, if your only motivation for doing something is just to make money, well, what happens if the money dries up?
Right.
Chances are you're going to lose that drive.
Yeah, you're going to lose your steam.
But if you're fueled by something deeper, a real passion, a genuine interest,
yeah,
that's a force that's way more likely to weather those storms.
it's way more resilient.
Right, exactly.
And I feel like that really connects with like why our listeners are here, right? Like that natural curiosity.
Oh, absolutely.
Like you want to learn, you want to understand things.
And that's powerful. That's an engine that's already inside you.
Yeah, it is.
It's not something you have to go searching for out in the world.
But even that internal drive, it doesn't always just appear, you know? Like the source talks about how often it's shaped by what we go through.
Right. It's forged in the fire, so to speak. The source talks about how hardship, even though it's difficult, it can actually refine that intrinsic desire.
It gives you perspective.
Yeah. It shows you what really matters to you, strips away the superficial stuff. It's like those challenges make those internal motivations even stronger.
That makes sense.
And it kind of leads to this idea of failure, which the source really dives into.
Yeah.
They call it the positive power of failure.
And it's so true because it's not about being defeated, but more about what you learn from those setbacks.
Exactly. Those stumbles, they give you valuable information. It's like, okay, course correction, how can I adapt and become more resilient because of this?
But failure becomes a feedback loop.
Totally. So by navigating those obstacles and learning from them, we're actively building up that undying force, that unstoppable momentum.
Right. And it's interesting because it's not just our own failures that teach us. Remember that Jon Stewart quote the source brought up?
Oh, yeah, about shipwrecks.
Yeah. He said something like, "There's nothing like a shipwreck to spark the imagination of everyone who was not on that specific ship."
I love that quote.
And it reminds us that seeing other people face challenges, even if we're not directly involved, can still give us perspective and kind of fuel our own internal drives.
Absolutely, because we can learn from their struggles without having to go through them ourselves.
Totally. It's almost like the source is trying to paint us a picture here. And it mentions this image of a giant boulder.
Rolling downhill.
Yes. Ignoring all the warning signs and just
Unstoppable.
unstoppable. And it's that feeling of momentum, that sense of being driven by something so strong inside.
Yeah, like a force of nature.
Right. That allows it to overcome anything in its path.
It just keeps going and going.
And so for everyone listening today, it seems like the takeaway here is that this unstoppable force.
Just undying force.
Yeah, this undying force, it's not just about brute strength.
Right.
It's about connecting to that deeper intrinsic motivation.
And consistently putting in the work.
Yeah, like putting in those continuous pushes that we talked about.
And using those setbacks, those failures, as opportunities to learn and grow.
Exactly, because those are actually fuel.
Fuel for the fire.
Yeah, they're not the end of the story.
So thinking about that and kind of bringing this back to you,
Yeah.
be interesting to consider, is there an area in your own life where you're really aiming for that kind of unstoppable momentum?
Well, that's a good one.
What are the core reasons, those deep internal motivations that are driving you towards it?
Yeah.
And how might those past difficulties, even the ones that felt like failures at the time,
Yeah.
how might they actually be contributing to your resilience and shaping the path you're on?
Something to think about.
Definitely something to think about.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Absolutely, it's been a pleasure.